Before we dive into this story that will touch your heart, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to our channel. Each subscription helps us continue sharing stories like this one, revealing the depth of the human spirit in times of adversity. Now, let's meet Vernon Hutchkins, a man whose loyalty was tested beyond imaginable limits. Vernon Hutchkins watched the sunset through the window of the doctor's office, his calloused builder's hands gripping his wife Melody's tightly. The silence was deafening as they waited for Dr. Harrison Vance to return. The weight of Vernon's 45 years felt like lead on his broad shoulders that autumn afternoon. "Mr. and Mrs. Hutchkins, I have the results." The doctor's voice broke the silence with the gentleness of someone accustomed to delivering difficult news. "Unfortunately, we've confirmed stage 3 ovarian cancer." Vernon felt time slow down. The words sounded distorted, as though he were hearing them underwater. Beside him, Melody sobbed, her slender fingers squeezing his with surprising strength. What's the next step?" Vernon managed to ask, his voice steadier than he expected. Dr. Vance, a serious man with compassionate eyes, slid a folder across the table. "We need to start treatment immediately. There are experimental protocols that have shown promising results in cases like your wife's." "We'll do whatever it takes," Vernon replied without hesitation. "I must warn you," the doctor continued, adjusting his glasses, "that these treatments are expensive and not covered by your insurance plan." That night, Vernon couldn't sleep. Sitting on the porch of the home he had built with his own hands, a testament to his hard work and realized dreams, he pondered what the future held. Hutchkins & Sons Construction was his pride, the legacy he intended to leave for Colton and Piper, his teenage children who were asleep, unaware of how their lives were about to change. The next morning, Vernon gathered his team in the office. Chester Pike, his foreman and friend for 2 decades, was the first to notice something was off. "Boss, you look like you haven't slept at all," Chester remarked, his sun-weathered face reflecting genuine concern. "Melody is sick," Vernon announced, his voice breaking for the first time. "Stage 3 ovarian cancer." The silence that followed was pierced only by the distant sound of a chainsaw at a worksite. Vernon took a deep breath and continued, "I'm going to need to make some changes around here. We need money for her treatment." Chester placed a hand on Vernon's shoulder. "Whatever you need, boss, we're with you." That week, Vernon began selling equipment. First, it was the newer machines, then the extra trucks. Each sale felt like tearing a piece of himself away. But when Melody smiled weakly from the bed where she was spending more and more time, he found the strength to keep going. By the end of the month, Earl Hutchkins, Vernon's father, showed up at the nearly empty construction office. "Son," the 70-year-old man said, placing an envelope on the table, "I want you to take this." Vernon opened the envelope to find a substantial check. "Dad, I can't." "Don't be stubborn like your mother," Earl replied firmly. "June and I have saved our whole lives. What good is money in the bank if not for moments like this?" Vernon felt his throat tighten. "I appreciate it, but I'll manage. I've always taken care of myself." Earl shook his head, recognizing in his son the same pride he had always shown. "Your mother and I will be here when you change your mind." As autumn gave way to winter, Vernon's resources rapidly dwindled. Weekly consultations, imported medications, complementary therapies, everything cost more than he ever imagined. One afternoon, standing in the garage entrance, Vernon looked at his Harley-Davidson, the bike he inherited from his father, who had received it from his own father. "It's just metal and rubber," he murmured to himself as he called a prospective buyer. The following spring, Vernon sat in what was left of his office, staring at a pile of medical bills and overdue invoices. The once thriving construction company was now operating at a fraction of its capacity. Projects were canceled, contracts lost. "Vernon, we need to talk," Chester said, closing the door behind him. "The guys are worried. We haven't received regular paychecks in 3 months." Vernon rubbed his tired eyes. "I know, Chester. I'm doing my best." "Nobody is complaining," Chester hurried to explain. "Everyone knows what's happening with Melody. We want to help. Some of the guys suggested working for less just to keep things running. Vernon rose abruptly, the wounded pride evident on his hardened face. I can't ask that of you. You're not asking, we're offering. That night, Vernon made a decision he never thought he would. The next morning, he gathered his team once more. I'm closing the construction company, he announced, his voice steady despite the pain he felt. Each of you will receive a letter of recommendation. You are the best professionals I've ever worked with. Chester was the last to leave. This isn't right, Vernon. Let us help. I need to do this my way, Chester, Vernon replied, extending his hand to his friend. Thank you for everything. 2 weeks later, a for sale sign was placed in front of the Hutchkins home, the house that Vernon had designed and built for his family, where every board and brick told a story of love and dedication. Colton, 17, reacted with outrage. We can't sell our house. Where will we live? We'll rent something smaller for now, Vernon explained patiently. It's temporary, son. What matters is your mother's health. Piper, 15, hugged her father silently. Her green eyes, identical to her mother's, shining with restrained tears. At night, when the children were asleep, Vernon sat by Melody's bedside. She looked weaker each day, her previously golden and vibrant hair now thin and lifeless. I don't know if we're doing the right thing, Melody whispered, her voice frail. We're sacrificing so much. Vernon held her hand, momentarily removing his wristband to gently massage her fingers. There's no price too high when it comes to you, he replied, trying to ignore the fact that even his ring would have to be sold soon. In the following months, Vernon became a shadow of his former self. Thin, with deep circles under his eyes, he worked temporary jobs during the day and cared for Melody at night. The family moved to a small apartment, furnished with what little they could save from the house. In the 13th month of treatment, Dr. Vance presented a new option. There's an experimental protocol in Switzerland, he explained, showing graphs and statistics that Vernon barely understood. It's our best hope now. How much? Vernon asked directly. $75,000, including accommodation. Vernon nodded mechanically. He had nothing left to sell but his last resort, the family beach house, a modest property inherited from his grandparents that he had sworn never to touch. That night, after Melody took her medication and fell asleep, Vernon called his brother, Dalton. I need to sell the beach house, he said bluntly. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Vernon, that's all that's left of our grandparents' legacy. It's Melody's last chance, Dalton. Dr. Vance said this treatment in Switzerland might be what she needs. Another silence. Are you sure this doctor knows what he's doing? $300,000 in treatments and she hasn't improved. I'm not giving up on her, Vernon interrupted, his voice tense. I'm selling the house with or without your approval. Dalton sighed. Do what you have to do, brother. The 14th month since the diagnosis marked a surprising turn of events. After returning from Switzerland, Melody began to show signs of improvement. Her color returned, she regained her appetite, and for the first time in over a year, she got out of bed unaided to make breakfast for the family. It's a miracle, Vernon told Dr. Vance during the follow-up appointment. I've never seen her this well since the beginning of treatment. The doctor smiled, checking the test results. The tumor markers are undetectable. It seems the Swiss protocol worked beyond our expectations. Vernon felt a wave of relief so intense he almost fainted. All the sacrifices, all the struggles had been worth it. Melody was alive. His family was intact. The rest could be rebuilt. In the following weeks, Melody's recovery continued to impress everyone. She started exercising, spending more time with the kids, and resuming activities she had given up. Vernon, exhausted yet happy, began to plan how to restart his professional life.
One night, while returning from a night shift as a security guard, the only job he had been able to find, Vernon was surprised to see the lights on in the living room and suitcases at the entrance of the apartment. "Melody?" he called, confused. She appeared from the bedroom, looking like he hadn't seen her in a long time, hair styled, makeup flawless, wearing a dress he didn't recognize. "We need to talk, Vernon," she said, her voice strangely distant. Vernon sat down slowly, a sense of discomfort growing in his chest. "What's going on?" "I'm leaving you," Melody announced, her voice devoid of emotion. "I've packed my bags. Colton and Piper are at a friend's house." Vernon stared at her, unable to process the words. "Leaving? What do you mean? Why?" Melody sighed impatiently. "Look at you, Vernon. Look at what you've become. A night security guard? No home, no business, nothing to offer." She walked around the room, gesturing dismissively. "You're pathetic. A real man wouldn't have lost everything." Vernon stood up, stunned. "I lost everything to save you. I sold everything I built to pay for your treatments." "And that should impress me?" She laughed, a cold sound Vernon had never heard before. "A competent man would have found a way to pay for the treatments without destroying our lives." "Melody, I don't understand. We just went through the worst. We're starting over together." "No, Vernon, you're starting over. I'm moving on." She grabbed her bag and walked toward the door. "My lawyer will be in touch." "Lawyer? What lawyer?" "Brent Caldwell," she replied, a small smile on her lips. "Actually, we've been together for a few months." The door closed, leaving Vernon alone in a deafening silence. The following months passed like a nightmare for Vernon. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Brent Caldwell, Melody's lawyer, was known for his aggressiveness in court and his ability to manipulate the system in favor of his clients. At the custody hearing, Vernon sat alone in a borrowed suit, while Melody appeared impeccably dressed, accompanied not only by Caldwell, but also by a legal assistant and a child psychologist. "Mr. Hutchkins has lost everything, his business, his home, his savings," Caldwell argued before the judge. "He works as a night security guard, lives in a one-bedroom apartment, and can barely support himself, let alone 2 teenage children." Vernon tried to defend himself. "I lost everything paying for her cancer treatments." "Treatments that were necessary to save Mrs. Hutchkins' life," Caldwell interrupted. "No one questions your motives, Mr. Hutchkins, only your ability to make responsible financial decisions." The hardest blow came when Colton and Piper were called to testify. Vernon had tried to talk to them in the weeks prior, but Melody always found excuses to prevent contact. "How do you feel living with your dad?" Caldwell gently asked Piper. The girl briefly glanced at Vernon, then looked away. "It's stressful. He's always worried about money. Sometimes he yells in the middle of the night." "And you, Colton?" The boy completely avoided looking at his father. "I'd rather stay with my mom. There's space there. I can invite my friends. With my dad, it's like we're always on the verge of collapse." Vernon felt those words hit him like physical blows. He knew Melody had manipulated the kids, but hearing those words from their own mouths was a pain he wasn't prepared to face. At the end of the hearing, the judge granted full custody to Melody, with supervised visits for Vernon only twice a month. As he left the courthouse, Vernon was approached by Earl and June, his parents, who had watched the proceedings in silence. "Son," June began, tears in her eyes. Vernon shook his head. "Not now, Mom. I need to be alone." 2 weeks later, unable to pay the rent on the apartment, Vernon moved into a motel room on the outskirts of town. The Lone Pine was the kind of place where no one asked questions, as long as the weekly payment was made on time. Room 17 became his world. A single bed, an old television, a microwave, and a small fridge. The thin walls let in every couple's fight, every child's cry, every siren in the street. Vernon spent his nights staring at the stained ceiling, mentally replaying every decision that had brought him to this point. During the day, he waited in a home center parking lot alongside other men, hoping for daily work in construction. Sometimes he was called, sometimes he wasn't. Ironically, he often worked as a helper on projects very similar to those his own construction company used to undertake. His only solace was the supervised visits with the kids, though those were also a source of anguish. Colton remained distant, responding with monosyllables to his father's attempts at conversation. Piper was more receptive, but Vernon could see the conflict in her eyes, the divided loyalty between her parents, the confusion over what had really happened. "Dad, is it true you almost left us without food to pay for Mom's treatments?" Piper asked, during a visit, her voice small and uncertain. Vernon felt his heart tighten. "No, sweetheart, I always put you first. We had to make sacrifices, yes, but you never went without the essentials. Mom said you were obsessive, that you spent money on treatments that weren't even necessary." Vernon held back the response he wanted to give. Instead, he took a deep breath. "Your mom was very sick. We did what the doctors recommended." As winter approached again, Vernon's situation deteriorated even further. His old car, the last remnant of his former life, broke down for good. Job opportunities dwindled with the bad weather. One particularly cold night, sitting in the motel room with only a sandwich for dinner, Vernon allowed himself, for the first time, to wonder if it was all worth it. It was 2 a.m. when a knock on the door woke Vernon from restless sleep. Confused and alert, he cautiously got up. "Who is it?" he asked, approaching the door without opening it. "Mr. Hutchkins, my name is Theodore Ashford. I'm a private investigator. We need to talk." Vernon hesitated, then partially opened the door, the security chain still in place. Outside stood a middle-aged man with a professional appearance, waiting patiently. "What do you want at this hour?" The man extended a card through the gap in the door. "I was hired to investigate a case that involves you directly. Can I come in? What I have to say shouldn't be discussed in the hallway." Reluctantly, Vernon removed the chain and allowed the stranger inside. The room felt even smaller with another person in it. "Who hired you?" Vernon asked, remaining standing. "Your father, Earl Hutchkins." Ashford placed a folder on the small table. "I've been working on this case for 6 months." "Case? What case?" Ashford opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. It was Melody, smiling, sitting in a cafe with a man Vernon recognized as Dr. Harrison Vance. The date in the corner of the photo was 3 years ago. "Do you know these people, Mr. Hutchkins?" Vernon nodded slowly. "My ex-wife and her doctor. What does this have to do with anything?" "Dr. Vance is not just her physician." Ashford took out another document from the folder. "He's Melody's first cousin." Vernon sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly dizzy. "What?" "Mr. Hutchkins, I will be direct. Your ex-wife never had cancer." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, or perhaps, in a strange way, like a release. That's not possible," Vernon stammered, though a part of him already knew it was true. Ashford continued relentlessly, placing document after document on the table. It was a fraud scheme from the start. Dr. Vance provided false diagnoses, fabricated test results. The symptoms Melody exhibited were induced by medications she was taking voluntarily. "Why?" Vernon's voice was just a whisper. "Money, Mr. Hutchkins. The $300,000 you paid for treatments, they were transferred to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, jointly controlled by Melody, Dr. Vance, and Brent Caldwell." Caldwell was involved from the beginning? From the initial planning, the three had been preparing this for at least 2 years before the supposed diagnosis. Vernon abruptly stood and walked to the window, pulling back the cheap curtain to look at the empty motel parking lot. His mind struggled to process the magnitude of the betrayal. "How did you find all this out?" Ashford adjusted his glasses. "Your father never believed the diagnosis. He noticed inconsistencies in Melody's behavior, details that didn't add up. When you refused his financial help, he decided to investigate on his own. Why didn't he tell me? He tried, Mr. Hutchkins, numerous times, but you were, forgive my bluntness, blinded by your devotion to your wife. Vernon closed his eyes, recalling his father's attempts, his brothers, even Chester's, questioning the treatments, the costs, the lack of improvement in Melody for so long, up until the Swiss miracle. I have more to tell, Ashford continued. Your father didn't sit idle while investigating. He bought your house when you put it up for sale. Vernon turned, shocked. What? He used a middleman, an investment firm. The house is intact, waiting for you. And there's more. Your crew, led by Chester Pike, turned down permanent jobs at other construction companies. They only took temporary work, waiting for your return. Vernon sat down again, his legs suddenly too weak to support him. Why would they do that? Because they believe in you, Mr. Hutchkins. Your father, your mother June, your brother Dalton, your crew, everyone has been working behind the scenes, gathering evidence, preparing for this moment. What moment? Ashford smiled for the first time. The moment of truth. Tomorrow morning, FBI agents will arrest Melody, Caldwell, and Dr. Vance for fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. The evidence is irrefutable. Vernon remained silent for a long time, trying to absorb everything. Finally, he lifted his gaze. And my children? Your father has already filed an emergency petition for temporary custody. With the evidence we have, there will be no difficulty in obtaining permanent custody for you. When Ashford finally left, it was past 4 in the morning. Vernon remained sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at the scattered documents that told the story of his meticulously planned destruction. And then, for the first time in almost 2 years, Vernon Hutchkins cried. Not out of sadness or despair, but from a strange mix of anger, relief, and surprisingly, gratitude. Spring arrived, bringing with it an air of renewal that seemed synchronized with Vernon's life. 6 months had passed since the night Theodore Ashford knocked on his door, and Vernon's world had transformed again, this time for the better. Melody, Brent Caldwell, and Dr. Harrison Vance were convicted in a swift trial, facing overwhelming evidence presented by the FBI. The sentence, 12 years in federal prison for each, plus full restitution of the defrauded amounts. Colton and Piper returned to live with their father in the family home, the same house Vernon had built with his own hands and that his father had secretly preserved for him. The reunion was initially difficult, marked by confusion, guilt, and a profound sense of betrayal the teenagers felt, not just towards their mother, but towards the system that had convinced them to testify against their father. "I'm sorry, Dad," Colton said one night, breaking months of emotional distance. "I didn't know. She told us so many things about you." Vernon hugged his son tightly. "It's not your fault, son. You were victims too." Hutchkins & Sons Construction made a comeback, with the original team returning as if they had never left. Chester Pike, loyal as ever, had kept in touch with former clients, preserving relationships that proved invaluable for restarting operations. "I always knew you'd come back, boss," Chester said on reopening day as they raised the company sign together. "Some men are made to build. It's what you do, not just with wood and concrete, but with people too." One Saturday afternoon, while the family gathered for a barbecue, a tradition they had resumed, Earl pulled Vernon aside to a quiet corner of the yard. "Son, there's something I need to ask you." Vernon looked at his father, noticing how Earl seemed to have aged in recent years. "What is it, Dad?" "Do you forgive me for acting behind your back? For investigating Melody without telling you?" Vernon smiled, placing a hand on his father's shoulder. "Forgive? Dad, you saved my life. You saved my family." "I did what any father would do." "No," Vernon countered gently. "You did what only a great father would do. You respected my decision, even knowing I was wrong, but you didn't abandon me for it." Earl cleared his throat, emotional. "I learned that from you, you know, watching how you never gave up, even when it seemed impossible." In the pocket of his shirt, Vernon carried an unusual reminder. the key to room 17 at the Lone Pine Motel. The manager had allowed him to keep it when he finally moved out. "Why do you keep that?" Piper asked one day, curious, as she saw him contemplating the object. "To remind me," Vernon replied. "Remind you of what?" Vernon smiled at his daughter. "That hitting rock bottom isn't the end when you have people who won't give up on you." Over time, Vernon began using his experience to help others. He started a support group for victims of medical and marital fraud. Occasionally, he was called as a consultant on cases similar to his own. In one of those meetings, a woman asked Vernon how he managed to talk about his experience without bitterness. "I'm not saying I don't have bad moments," he replied honestly, "but I learned something valuable that I might not have learned otherwise." "What?" Vernon thought for a moment before answering. "That true strength isn't in never falling, but in having people who won't let you stay down, and in being that kind of person for others." As he returned home that night, Vernon found Colton and Piper in the living room, laughing at some shared joke. The sound filled the house with a joy he had feared he might never experience again. Standing silently in the hallway, watching his children, Vernon felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had lost almost everything, but in the process, he discovered what truly mattered, and that no one could ever take from him. If you enjoyed this story of overcoming and resilience, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your reactions motivate us to keep bringing you stories that touch the heart and make us reflect on the true meaning of strength and loyalty. Until next time.